The unseen threat. The human colony on Veritas 3, a distant Earth outpost nestled in the Andromeda cluster, thrived with energy. Settlers worked tirelessly to carve a new life from the rugged alien terrain. The sky shimmered with twin suns, and vast forests of crimson foliage stretched across the horizon. It was a symbol of humanity's determination, an audacious declaration that no frontier was too far or hostile to tame. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the colony's chief scientist, stood atop a fortified observation tower, gazing into the brilliant expanse of the twin suns. She marveled at how far humanity had come. Just a century ago, this world was a distant speck in the void, barely a whisper on telescopes back on Earth. Now, it was a bustling hub of ingenuity and ambition. But as she adjusted the scanner, an anomaly in the atmosphere caught her attention. A faint blip, growing stronger by the second. "Elena," crackled a voice through her comlink. It was Captain Marcus Kane, head of the colony's defense forces. "We're picking up something unusual. High energy readings in orbit. Could just be a meteor storm, but I'd like you to verify." She furrowed her brow and brought up the scanner data on her tablet. "This isn't meteoric activity. It's concentrated, controlled. Marcus, I think." Her words were cut off as the sky above the colony darkened. Massive shadows eclipsed the suns, and the once bustling colony fell silent as people craned their necks toward the heavens. Alien ships, sleek and obsidian black, descended like predators circling prey. Their surfaces shimmered with strange, otherworldly runes that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Marcus's voice was calm but firm through the colony-wide speakers. "Everyone to designated shelters. This is not a drill. Defense teams, mobilize. We have incoming." Elena's pulse quickened. "Incoming," she whispered to herself. But from who? Apex predators enter the fray. The alien fleet was unlike anything humanity had encountered. It wasn't just the scale, though the ships dwarfed even the largest human vessels. It was the deliberate precision with which they moved. Every maneuver was calculated, every descent like the strike of a predatory beast. The Krathons, as they would later be identified, were not just conquerors, they were hunters. To them, the thrill of subjugation was sport, and humanity was their latest challenge. Their leader, Commander Yurak Thrill, stood at the helm of the flagship Voracious, his yellow eyes scanning the surface below. "Primitive bipeds," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. "They build, they expand, but they do not understand their place. Today they learn." Yurak's second-in-command, a lithe and cunning Krathon named Sarah, hissed. "They've expanded faster than our scouts predicted. They may resist." Yurak let out a guttural laugh. "Good. Let them resist. It will make the hunt more satisfying." The first blow. On Veritas 3, panic erupted as the first plasma bolts rained down, turning once thriving fields into smoldering craters. The colony's automated defenses sprang to life, rail guns and missile silos firing into the sky. Explosions rippled across the alien fleet, but the Krathon shields absorbed most of the impact effortlessly. Marcus Kane barked orders over the comms, his voice a lifeline for the frightened colonists. "Defense teams, focus fire on their landing craft. Keep them away from the shelters. Civilians, follow the evacuation routes." Elena, however, wasn't running for shelter. She raced toward the research labs, her mind spinning with ideas. The colony wasn't defenseless, not entirely. Her team had been working on experimental energy disruptors, a prototype designed to disable advanced shielding systems. If it worked, they might stand a chance. In the distance, alien drop pods pierced the atmosphere, slamming into the ground with thunderous force. From within emerged towering Krathons, their armored exoskeletons glinting in the sunlight. Each stood nearly 3 meters tall, wielding weapons that crackled with plasma energy. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their every motion fluid and deadly. Humanity strikes back. The first wave of Krathons swept through the colony's outskirts, expecting easy kills. But humanity had learned long ago that survival meant adaptation. Armed with little more than grit and ingenuity, the colonists fought back. Marcus led a squad of defenders in powered armor, using hit-and-run tactics to draw the aliens into traps. "Stick to cover," Marcus shouted as plasma bolts tore through the air. "Elena, tell me you've got something cooking over there." "I do," she replied, her voice strained as she and her team worked frantically to power up the disruptor. "But it's untested. If it backfires, better than sitting ducks," Marcus retorted. "Do it." The disruptor roared to life, emitting a low-frequency pulse that rippled through the battlefield. Several Krathon shields flickered, then failed, leaving them vulnerable. The defenders seized the opportunity, focusing their fire and taking down the exposed invaders. "Direct hit," Marcus shouted triumphantly, but his celebration was cut short as a new wave of Krathons surged forward, adapting to the disruptor's frequency and recalibrating their shields. The stakes become clear. From the command center aboard the Voracious, Yurak watched with growing interest. The humans, though technologically inferior, were fighting with a tenacity he hadn't anticipated. "Commander," Sora said, her voice laced with irritation, "their resistance is stronger than projected." Yurak's lips curled into a predator smile. "Stronger, yes, but it makes no difference. Send in the Dreadclaws." The Dreadclaws, specialized Krathon enforcers bred for close combat, descended next. Clad in heavier armor and equipped with serrated plasma blades, they were designed to break through entrenched resistance. On the ground, Marcus and his team braced themselves as the Dreadclaws charged. The clash was brutal. For every Krathon that fell, 3 humans were lost. But they held the line, refusing to yield even an inch. As night fell over Veritas 3, the colony remained under siege. Smoke and fire filled the air, and the cries of battle echoed across the landscape. Yet despite the chaos, a flicker of hope remained. Elena stood in the lab, staring at a holographic projection of the disruptor. "We need to amplify the pulse," she said, determination hardening her voice. "If we can take out their fleet's shielding, even for a moment, we might turn the tide." Marcus's voice came through the comm. "Do it. We'll hold them off for as long as we can." And so, against the overwhelming force of an apex predator species, humanity prepared to strike back, not with brute strength, but with ingenuity and the indomitable will to survive. The turning point. The Krathon fleet hovered ominously in the skies above Veritas 3, casting a suffocating shadow over the battered colony below. Fires raged across the settlement, and the acrid smell of smoke mingled with the metallic tang of ozone left by alien plasma weapons. But amidst the devastation, humanity was far from beaten. The Amplifier's blueprint. Dr. Elena Ramirez worked tirelessly in the colony's underground research lab. The faint hum of generators filled the air as she and her team surrounded the disruptor. Its first activation had been a success, but it was clear that the device needed a significant upgrade to stand a chance against the Krathon fleet. Elena, her assistant, Dr. Jiro Takeda, said, studying a holographic schematic, "The disruptor's pulse strength is capped by the current energy grid. If we reroute power from non-essential systems and tap into the reactor directly, we might amplify the pulse enough to disable their entire fleet's shields." "That kind of power surge could blow the reactor," Elena replied, her voice edged with concern. "If it goes wrong, the colony will cease to exist anyway, if we do nothing," Jiro interrupted. "We're out of time." Elena's hands trembled as she adjusted the schematic. The weight of the colony's survival rested on her shoulders. "Then we do it. Marcus is counting on us." Holding the line. On the surface, Captain Marcus Kane and his defense forces braced for another wave of Krathon attacks. The defenders were battered, their numbers dwindling, but their resolve remained unshaken. Marcus crouched behind a makeshift barricade, his powered armor scorched and battered. Around him, his squad took up defensive positions, their faces grim but determined. "They're regrouping," said Surgeon Prayasing, peering through a pair of binoculars. "Looks like they're bringing something big this time." Marcus followed her gaze. A massive Krathon walker, its legs like jagged pillars of obsidian, lumbered toward the colony. Plasma cannons jutted from its sides, and its armored carapace glinted with a menacing sheen. "We're outgunned," Praya muttered. "We've been outgunned since day one," Marcus replied, a hint of defiance in his voice. "But we're still here, and until Elena gives the signal, we hold the line." The ground trembled as the walker approached, its cannons charging with an ominous hum. Marcus barked orders, and his team sprang into action. Missiles streaked through the air, colliding with the walker's shields in bursts of fiery light. Human ingenuity met Krathon might in a desperate battle of attrition. The Krathon perspective. Aboard the Voracious, Commander Yurak Thrill observed the battle below with a mixture of irritation and admiration. "These humans are tenacious," he remarked, his voice a low growl. "They fight as if they have nothing to lose." Sarah, his second-in-command, hissed in agreement. "Their tactics are crude but effective. The disruptor was unexpected. It nearly compromised our shields." Yurak turned to her, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Then let us ensure they don't get another chance. Deploy the annihilator." Sarah's expression faltered. "The annihilator? But, Commander, it's..." "A calculated risk," Yurak interjected. "These humans have earned my respect, but respect will not save them." The annihilator. The annihilator was a colossal Krathon weapon, a floating fortress armed with an array of devastating plasma cannons and energy disruptors. It descended from the flagship like a harbinger of doom, its sheer size casting the colony into deeper shadow. Marcus's heart sank as he saw the annihilator emerge. "What in God's name is that?" "A death sentence," Praya replied grimly, "unless Elena pulls off a miracle." The fortress unleashed its weapons, obliterating entire sections of the colony in blinding bursts of energy. The defenders scattered, struggling to regroup. Marcus's comm crackled to life. "Marcus, this is Elena," came her voice, strained but resolute. "The amplifier is ready. We're about to activate it." "Good timing," Marcus replied, ducking as debris rained down around him. "We're fresh out of options." The pulse. In the lab, Elena and her team made final adjustments to the disruptor. Sweat dripped down her brow as she entered the final command sequence. "Here goes nothing," she whispered. The disruptor roared to life, emitting a deep, resonating hum. A pulse of energy erupted from the device, spreading outward in a cascading wave of blue light. For a moment, the entire battlefield froze as the pulse swept across it. Krathon shields flickered, then failed entirely. The annihilator's energy systems sparked and sputtered, its weapons falling silent. "It worked," Jiro exclaimed. But the victory was short-lived. The disruptor began to overheat, warning lights flashing across the console. Elena's heart raced. "We need to stabilize it, or it'll overload." "Not yet," Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. "Give us a chance to finish this." The counterattack. With the Krathon shields down, the defenders launched a desperate counterattack. Missiles and railgun fire tore into the exposed alien forces. The annihilator, once an unstoppable juggernaut, crumbled under the onslaught, its massive frame collapsing in a plume of fire and smoke. Marcus led his squad in a final push, targeting the remaining Krathon forces. The battlefield erupted in chaos as humans and aliens clashed in brutal combat. For every Krathon that fell, another human was lost, but the tide was turning. Above, the Voracious began to retreat, its commander finally acknowledging the depth of his miscalculation. "Commander Yurak," Sora said, her tone tense, "we're losing too many. The humans have outmaneuvered us." Yurak's jaw clenched. "Withdraw. This isn't over." A fragile victory. As the last Krathon ship disappeared into the sky, the battlefield fell silent. The defenders, battered and bloodied, stood among the ruins of their colony. Marcus removed his helmet, his face etched with exhaustion and relief. "We did it," Priya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. "For now." In the lab, Alina and her team managed to stabilize the disruptor just before it overloaded. She slumped against the console, a wave of relief washing over her. But the victory felt hollow. The colony lay in ruins, and the Krathons would undoubtedly return. Yet, for the first time, humanity had shown that they were not helpless prey. They were survivors, fighters, and innovators. As the twin suns rose over Veritas III, the colonists began to regroup, their resolve stronger than ever. The war was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward reclaiming their future. The Predator's revenge. The twin suns of Veritas III rose reluctantly, as if the planet itself was weary from the brutal battle. Smoke plumes spiraled into the sky, the acrid stench of burned machinery and scorched earth lingering over the ruined colony. But amidst the wreckage, humanity stood tall. For the first time, they had defied the odds and forced a retreat from the seemingly unstoppable Krathon forces. Yet there was no time for celebration. The aftermath. Captain Marcus Kane trudged through the debris-strewn streets, his powered armor now little more than a charred, dented shell of its former self. The remnants of his squad gathered at what remained of the central command center. Their faces were a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Casualty report?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. Sergeant Priya Singh flipped through a data pad, her fingers trembling slightly. "We've lost about 60% of the defense forces. Civilian casualties. Too many to count right now. The colony's infrastructure is in shambles. But we're still here. That counts for something," Marcus said, though the weight in his voice betrayed his attempt at optimism. He turned to the group. "The Krathons retreated, but don't think for a second that they're gone. They're regrouping. This was just round one." In the underground lab, Dr. Elena Ramirez and her team worked feverishly to repair the experimental disruptor. The device, which had been instrumental in their victory, was now barely functional. Wires dangled from its frame, and its core emitted an ominous hum. "We bought ourselves time," Elena said, her voice filled with both exhaustion and resolve. "But if they come back, we'll need to be ready. And this time, we need more than just one disruptor." Jiro Takeda nodded, his eyes scanning the damage. "Scaling up won't be easy, especially with the colony in this condition. But we don't have a choice, do we?" Elena sighed. "No, we don't." The Krathon response. Far above Veritas III, aboard the flagship Voracious, Commander Yurak Thrail seethed with anger. The tactical room buzzed with activity as officers reported damage assessments and retreat protocols. Yurak stood at the center, his yellow eyes glowing with a predatory fury. "Commander, our losses were significant," Shara, his second-in-command, said cautiously. "The humans have proven resourceful." Yurak growled, his claws digging into the edge of the command console. "Resourceful. They are vermin. Clever, perhaps, but vermin nonetheless. They caught us off guard. That will not happen again." He gestured to a holographic display of Veritas III, his voice dripping with menace. "Initiate the Eclipse Protocol. If they wish to play at being predators, then we will remind them who reigns supreme in this galaxy." Sarah's eyes widened. "The Eclipse Protocol. That will leave nothing of the colony, or the planet." "Precisely," Yurak replied, a cruel smile curling his lips. "We will not simply defeat them. We will erase them." A desperate plan. Back on Veritas III, the colonists worked tirelessly to rebuild what they could. Marcus, Priya, Elena, and Jiro gathered in the makeshift command center to discuss their next steps. "We've intercepted a transmission," Jiro said, his voice grim. "The Krathons are planning something big. They're calling it the Eclipse Protocol. We don't know exactly what it entails, but it sounds catastrophic." Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tightening, What are our options? Elena hesitated. If they're bringing something that massive, conventional defense won't work, we need to take the fight to them. Are you suggesting an assault on their fleet? Priya asked, incredulous. With what? We're barely holding this place together. Elena's eyes burned with determination. We don't have to destroy their fleet. We just need to disable their command structure. If we can take out their flagship, the Voracious, it could throw their entire operation into chaos. Jiro nodded slowly. It's a gamble, but it might work. Their fleet relies heavily on centralized leadership. Cut off the head, and the body falls. Marcus stood, his expression hardening. Then that's what we'll do. We'll assemble a strike team and take the fight to them. Preparing for the infiltration. The colonists worked with single-minded focus, converting one of their remaining transport ships into a makeshift stealth vessel. Engineers stripped it of unnecessary weight, replacing its hull with an experimental material designed to evade Krathon sensors. Weapons were retrofitted, and the crew trained relentlessly for the mission ahead. Among the volunteers was a young technician named Darius Cole, whose family had been among the casualties in the initial attack. Though inexperienced in combat, his knowledge of alien technology made him an invaluable asset. I'm going, Darius said firmly when Marcus questioned his decision. I owe it to them. And I know their systems. I can help. Marcus clapped a hand on the young man's shoulder. Just stay close to me. We're getting through this together. The strike team. The strike team consisted of Marcus, Priya, Elena, Jiro, and Darius, along with a handful of other seasoned fighters. As they prepared to board the stealth ship, the weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. This is it, Marcus said, addressing the team. We're flying straight into the lion's den. If we succeed, we might just save this colony, and maybe humanity. If we fail, well, let's not fail. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, their resolve evident in their eyes. Elena approached Marcus before they boarded. If we don't make it back, we will, Marcus interrupted, his voice steady. We have to. The ship lifted off, its engines a low hum as it ascended into the smoky skies. The colonists watched in silence as it disappeared, carrying with it their last, fragile hope. Into the void. The journey to the Krathon fleet was tense and silent. Inside the ship, the strike team reviewed their plan. Elena and Jiro had devised a way to use the disruptor's technology to overload the Voracious's core, but it required them to infiltrate the ship's command center and plant the device manually. As they approached the fleet, the scale of the Krathon forces became evident. Thousands of ships formed a near-impenetrable wall around the flagship, but the stealth ship glided undetected, weaving through the enemy ranks like a shadow. Inside the Voracious, Commander Yurak stood unaware of the impending threat. His mind was consumed with visions of conquest, his confidence unshaken. But humanity had a way of surprising its enemies. In the heart of the beast, the stealth ship glided like a phantom through the Krathon fleet, its retrofitted systems masking its presence from the enemy's advanced sensors. Inside, the strike team huddled in tense silence, each member acutely aware of the stakes. The walls of the transport seemed to hum with anticipation, echoing the anxiety coursing through their veins. We're approaching the Voracious, Jiro whispered from the cockpit. His hands danced over the controls with practiced precision. Their sensor grid hasn't picked us up. So far, so good. Marcus Kane leaned over his shoulder, his eyes locked on the massive Krathon flagship that loomed ahead. Its dark, jagged surface seemed to drink in the surrounding starlight, its sheer size eclipsing everything around it. Once we breach the outer hull, Marcus said, turning to address the team, there's no turning back. Remember the plan. Stick together, and we'll get through this. Breach and entry. The stealth ship docked at a service port along the Voracious underbelly, a spot Jiro had identified as a potential weak point. The team moved swiftly, donning oxygen masks and magnetized boots as the ship's airlock hissed open. Priya Singh led the charge, her rifle at the ready. "Keep it quiet," she murmured. "We're in their house now." The Krathon ship's interior was a stark contrast to its menacing exterior. The corridors were dimly lit, illuminated by faint bioluminescent veins that pulsed along the walls. The air was thick with an acrid metallic scent, and the low hum of alien machinery reverberated through the structure. Darius Cole, the youngest member of the team, stared wide-eyed at the alien architecture. "This place feels alive," he whispered. "It might be," Elena Ramirez replied grimly. "The Krathons are known for their bioengineered tech. Stay focused." The team moved with practiced precision, weaving through the labyrinthine corridors. Elena carried the disruptor core in a reinforced case, its dull glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. Their destination was the command center, a fortified chamber at the heart of the ship. The first encounter. The strike team's luck held until they reached a junction near the central reactor. There, a squad of Krathon soldiers emerged, their towering frames blocking the path. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as the two groups locked eyes. "Contact," Marcus barked. The corridor erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts seared the air as the Krathons opened fire. The team scattered, taking cover behind alien machinery and returning fire with deadly precision. Priya's rifle spat bursts of energy, dropping one of the aliens, while Marcus charged forward, his powered armor absorbing glancing blows. Darius fumbled with his sidearm, his hands trembling. "Focus, kid," Marcus shouted, taking down another Krathon with a well-placed shot. "We've got this." The firefight was brutal but brief. When the last Krathon fell, the team regrouped, breathing heavily. Marcus checked the wounded. "Everyone's still with me." "We're good," Priya said, though a scorch mark on her shoulder armor told a different story. She winced but waved him off. "Let's move." The command center. The team finally reached the massive doors of the command center. Elena set to work hacking the alien control panel, her fingers flying over the interface. "Hurry," Marcus urged, his eyes scanning the corridor for any signs of reinforcements. "I'm going as fast as I can," Elena shot back. The panel emitted a series of beeps before the doors slid open with a low hiss. The command center was a cavernous room filled with alien consoles and holographic displays. At the center stood Commander Yurak Thrall, his imposing figure framed by the glow of a tactical map. His yellow eyes narrowed as the humans entered. "Ah," Yurak said, his voice a guttural growl. "The vermin come to my doorstep. How amusing." Marcus stepped forward, his rifle aimed squarely at the Krathon commander. "Surrender, Yurak. This ends now." Yurak let out a deep, rumbling laugh. "Surrender? To you? Do you not understand what you've walked into? This ship is a monument to your species' doom, a battle of wits and will." Yurak gestured, and hidden panels slid open to reveal more Krathon soldiers. The team braced for another fight, but Marcus raised a hand, signaling them to hold. "This isn't about you winning," Marcus said, his voice steady. "It's about us surviving." Yurak tilted his head, intrigued. Brave words, but bravery does not change reality. As Yurak spoke, Elena and Jiro moved toward the central console, the disruptor core in hand. Darius provided cover, his eyes darting nervously between the advancing Krathon soldiers and his teammates. The tension in the room was palpable. Yurak's soldiers moved to intercept, but Marcus and Priya opened fire, forcing them back. The air crackled with energy as the two sides clashed, the humans using every ounce of their ingenuity to hold the line. The core activation. "Elena," Marcus shouted over the chaos. "How much longer?" "Almost there," she replied, her hands trembling as she connected the disruptor to the ship's systems. "This is going to overload their entire grid, but we'll only have minutes to get out once it's active." "Do it," Marcus barked. The disruptor came to life, its pulse spreading through the ship. Consoles sparked, lights flickered, and the Krathon soldiers faltered as their advanced systems began to fail. Yerek snarled, his composure finally breaking. "You dare defile my ship?" Marcus smirked, raising his rifle. "Welcome to the Resistance." Escape. The team fought their way back to the docking bay as alarms blared throughout the ship. Krathon reinforcements swarmed the corridors, but the humans pressed on, their determination unyielding. "Move, move, move," Marcus shouted as they boarded the stealth ship. Juro fired up the engines, and the vessel lurched away just as the disruptor reached critical mass. From the safety of space, the team watched as the Voracious erupted in a blinding explosion. The Krathon flagship was no more. A fragile victory. Cheers erupted aboard the stealth ship, but the moment was bittersweet. Marcus slumped into a seat, his armor scorched and battered. "We bought ourselves time," he said, his voice heavy. "But this war is far from over." Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the stars. "They'll be back, but so will we." As the stealth ship disappeared into the void, the surviving Krathon fleet began to regroup. In the wreckage of the Voracious, Commander Yurak's escape pod drifted silently. His eyes burned with hatred as he stared at the distant retreating ship. "This isn't over," he vowed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Not by a long shot." The gathering storm. The stealth ship streaked through the dark expanse of space, leaving behind the fiery wreckage of the Voracious. On board, the strike team sat in heavy silence, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. They had dealt a decisive blow to the Krathons, but each of them knew this victory was a mere foothold in an uphill battle. Debriefing the team. Marcus Kane leaned against the bulkhead, his rifle still clutched tightly in his hands. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving only exhaustion and the dull ache of bruises and burns. "Status check," he said, his voice raspy. "Everyone accounted for." "We're here," Priya Singh replied, though her voice carried the strain of pain. She adjusted the makeshift bandage over her scorched shoulder. "Barely." Elena Ramirez wiped soot from her face, her eyes focused on the disruptor core, now inert. "We pulled it off, but they'll adapt. The next time we face them, we won't have the element of surprise." Jiro Takeda gave a grim nod from the pilot's seat. "And next time, they'll come with a vengeance." Darius Cole, the youngest of the group, sat quietly in the corner, his gaze distant. "We destroyed their flagship," he murmured. "But I can't shake the feeling that we've only made things worse." Marcus exhaled, his jaw tightening. "We hit them where it hurts. Now, it's our job to make sure that hurt lasts." The Krathon homeworld. Far away, on the obsidian plains of the Krathon homeworld, Commander Yurak Thrall's escape pod descended like a falling star. It landed with a resonating crash amidst a sprawling complex of jagged towers and bioengineered fortresses. Krathon engineers swarmed the pod, cutting it open to reveal their commander, battered but alive. Yurak stepped out, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. The High Council awaited him in the central chamber of the Nexus Citadel, an immense structure that pulsed with the lifeblood of their bioengineered civilization. "Commander Yurak," intoned one of the counselors, their voice a low rumble. "Your failure has cost us dearly." Yurak's claws flexed, his pride bruised but unbroken. "The humans are not the prey we thought them to be. They fight with a ferocity that belies their primitive origins." Another counselor hissed, "They destroyed our flagship. The shame is unbearable." Yurak straightened, his voice steady and filled with venomous resolve. "The humans have declared war on the Krathon Empire, and I will ensure they regret it. Give me full authority over our forces. Let me lead the Reclamation Armada, and I will crush their defiance." The council deliberated, their bioluminescent eyes flickering in the dim chamber. Finally, the lead counselor spoke. "The Reclamation Armada is yours, Yurak. But failure is not an option. Bring us their world, or do not return." Yurak bowed, a sinister grin spreading across his face. "As you command." A call for unity. On Veritas 3, the battered colony began to rebuild. Word of the strike team's success had spread like wildfire, inspiring a renewed sense of hope among the survivors. But Marcus knew hope wouldn't be enough to win the war. In the colony's central square, now little more than a clearing amidst rubble, Marcus stood before a gathering of colonists. His armor bore the scars of battle, and his voice carried the weight of leadership. "We hurt them," he began, his tone firm but measured. "We made them bleed. But we can't afford to rest. The Crathons aren't just coming back for revenge. They're coming to destroy everything we've built. Every home, every family, every dream." He paused, scanning the crowd. "We can't fight them alone. We need allies. We need every colony, every fleet, every human soul ready to stand and fight. This is no longer just about Veritas 3. This is about humanity's survival." The crowd murmured in agreement, their determination reignited. Elena stepped forward, holding a tablet displaying the schematics for the disruptor. "We'll share this technology with every human outpost. Together, we can level the playing field." Jiro added, "We'll send a distress signal to Earth, to the other colonies. If we unite, we can turn this war around." Marcus nodded. "Prepare the signal. Let's remind the galaxy what humanity is capable of." The signal reaches Earth. The distress signal from Veritas 3 traveled across the void, eventually reaching Earth, humanity's cradle. In the sprawling command center of the United Earth Defense Fleet, Admiral Rachel Hayes read the message with a sinking heart. "So it's begun," she murmured. Turning to her officers, she issued swift orders. "Prepare the fleet. Mobilize every available ship. If the Crathons think they can wipe us out, they'll learn that Earth is not so easily conquered." Across the colonies, the call to arms spread like wildfire. Merchant vessels were retrofitted with weapons. Outdated ships were hauled from mothball fleets and repaired. Scientists and engineers worked day and night to enhance the disruptor technology. The Human Resistance Network was born, a united front determined to defy extinction. Yarek's counterstrike. Meanwhile, the Crathon Reclamation Armada began its relentless march toward Veritas 3. Yarek personally oversaw the preparations, his fleet now bolstered by new warships equipped with countermeasures for the disruptor technology. As the fleet moved, Yarek addressed his officers aboard the Obsidian Fang, his new flagship. "These humans have shown their teeth, but they are still prey. This time, we will strike not just at their colonies, but at their spirit. We will break their unity, shatter their resolve, and remind them of their place beneath us." The final preparations. On Veritas 3, the colonists braced for the inevitable. Defensive fortifications were reinforced, and newly arrived ships from neighboring colonies joined the effort. Marcus, Priya, Elena, Jiro, and Darius worked tirelessly to coordinate the growing resistance. Standing on a ridge overlooking the colony, Marcus watched as the first stars of the evening emerged. Priya joined him, her voice quiet. "Do you think we're ready?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "No one's ever ready for something like this, but we'll fight anyway. Because if we don't, there's nothing left." The two stood in silence, the weight of their duty heavy on their shoulders. Below them, the lights of the colony shone like beacons in the dark, a fragile but unyielding testament to humanity's resilience. Far above, the Crathon fleet approached, their ships blotting out the stars. The storm was coming, and with it, the fight for humanity's very survival.